I want to stress the importance when it comes to customs or various other laws and ideas having to do with Pesach that you should please be in touch and check with the rabbi of your specific community, because it may differ with what I have been taught or I am teaching to my community. If you have any questions, of course, that you would like to ask of me, you're welcome to do so. However, once again, if you are of a different community or of different customs or of a different place, please make a point of speaking directly to the rabbi of your community in order to make sure that the information I have given pertains to your community and yourself. The first class is on buying food and other items. That's the first thing we're going to be doing if you haven't done it yet. And there are many questions that come up about buying food for Pesach with a special Passover certification. Sometimes there is certification on things and it's not really necessary. Other times it's very hard to find it with certification. So one of the things that for the last number of years people have been trying to do is to really make it clear what has to have certification and what doesn't have to have certification. And the most interesting point of it is a lot of this are issues of chemistry. The halacha, of course, applies, but the halacha, any one of us could know. You're not supposed to have chametz. There's the halacha, and how we apply the halacha. But one would not think that there are certain things that have chametz that that we use. You wouldn't have no reason to think that you'd have to have it certified kosher, because you can't imagine there to be any chametz in it. So we're going to see some of those. On the other hand, there are certain things that we find very readily kosher for Pesach, but it doesn't really have to be, and so we'll talk about those as well. All right, so I thought we'd begin with number one: does that really need to be certified kosher for Passover? So the first thing to talk about are paper goods. That is to say, paper plates, napkins, and those types of things. So here, all of the plates and the napkins and anything like that you'll purchase to use on Passover, you only really have one area that has the most concern. And that area is with the paper plates. That is, any paper product that you're going to be using for food, that has to be stiff. It is made to be stiff, like a paper plate. So if it gets wet, it's not going to fold over so easily. Very often will have cornstarch on them. The manufacturers will take paper plates and they'll put cornstarch on the paper plates as a way of making them so they'll be stiff. And so therefore, one has to get paper plates specifically, either with hashkacha, which is not hard to find with Israeli brands, or you don't buy paper plates. You can buy plastic ones, you can buy styrofoam ones, but the paper ones would be an issue. That's with plates. When it comes to napkins, to plastic cups, or to styrofoam cups, is not an issue. But really, it's only something like a plate. That is a question. You are able today to find all of these items kosher for Passover, and then you don't have to think about it. But the truth is, you can, if you use a lot of paper items and you want to buy it by the case from some place that that does it that way, you without a second thought, you can purchase every type of paper good that you want to use for Passover, except for what I just mentioned, the paper plates. And there you should try to use something else, like kosher ones, or ones that are plastic or styrofoam, since they're stiff enough that they don't put anything on them. That would make a difference. Next, we have aluminum foil. You will find aluminum foil certified kosher for Passover. There is no need that aluminum foil should be certified kosher for Passover. Most of the time when this is done because the certifying agency is going into the factory anyways. So they say, if we're paying you to come to our factory, we want you to certify everything we make for Passover. So they'll certify that the aluminum foil has no chametz, and they'll make sure that it doesn't come into contact with it, and they're not just stealing money, they are doing something for it. However, because of how aluminum foil is manufactured, you do not need aluminum foil that is made special for Pesach. But what you do need with aluminum foil is that you have to open a new roll for Pesach. You can't use the same roll you've been using all along, because we're not careful. Right, during the year, while we're careful with kosher, we're not careful with chametz, so that we could have the roll open and just carry a challah over the open roll of aluminum foil, and chametz can get inside, or anything can. And since anything that's open, and there's no reason to think that we were careful with it and nothing could get inside of it, therefore one should buy a new roll of aluminum foil. The same thing with saran wrap. If you use like plastic wrap or wax paper, those types of things should have should be bought specifically for Passover, but they don't have to be kosher for Passover. While you may find them, and it's fine to do it, you don't have to. Raw vegetables. Lots of people ask me about raw vegetables because they'll go to someone's house and they will see that some people peel vegetables and for Pesach, and they will not eat peels. Well, none of us eat peels on certain vegetables. There are some that we do. It's very common that we would leave the peel perhaps on a cucumber. Some would do that on an apple, right, on a fruit. So there are certain things that we normally eat that way, and those who eat that way, there are some who feel that some of these have a coating on them, and that might be an issue. But it's not really accepted as the law, and so you don't have to be careful about raw vegetables and raw fruits as far as Passover is concerned. You could have issues as far as Truma and Meiser, the laws that have to do with Israel. With certain fruits and vegetables, you might have other issues, but as far as Passover is concerned, if you use a fruit or vegetable throughout the year, you can use that same fruit or vegetable raw from your fruit store or from your fruit department without thinking twice about it. Where you have problems with vegetables or fruits is when it becomes processed. So for instance, bagged lettuce, right, already cut and bagged, well, sometimes they will use, as you'll see on the back of your sheet when you look at it later on, sometimes they use various chemicals to keep that vegetable green. They keep it, right, so it doesn't turn brown like it would if you did it, and left it sitting in a bag for a couple days. So they want it to stay green longer, so they put chemicals on it, which may not be harmful for us, but these chemicals are sometimes chametz, or based on chametz, and therefore we would have to make sure that if you buy bagged vegetables, you buy pre-cut and peeled carrots, those types of things, they have to either be done in a place that is kosher for Passover, or they have to be certified kosher for Passover. So you have to get one of the two. And you'll see when you get closer, for instance, for those people who use romaine lettuce. A lot of people, rather than buying romaine lettuce and for your maror, for your bitter herb, and taking it and cleaning it all and checking it for bugs and so forth, they'll want to buy it already done, already bagged. And you'll see that the brands that have been checked for bugs and have already been peeled and put into bags, like the ones from Israel, like the brand, one of the brands is Bodek, for instance, which means checked. That's a company name. They will already, if you start looking at them now, will all say kosher for Passover. So you will have no problem with those.
So that means they haven't put a chemical in it?
Correct. Or if they have, they put something else in, but chances are they haven't put anything in it. Okay. The other areas of fruits and vegetables are when they're canned. And there any canned fruits and vegetables have to have a certification for two basic reasons. One is all their ingredients, and there's often lots of ingredients, especially with fruit. You can have syrups and sweeteners and ascorbic acids, all these types of things put into the liquid that surrounds the fruit. And many of these things can be kitnius, many of them can be made from corn syrup, which is kitnius, or it can be made from things that are chametz. And therefore all canned, bottled, processed in any way fruits and vegetables have to have a certification for Passover, because there's a very serious chance that they may have something in it. Nora, you were first. You had something?
Question. Just going back to fruit and vegetables. Green beans, bean sprouts, and snow peas, are they considered as kidney?
Snow peas are, beans are. I'm not sure about so I'll look it up. But those are examples of kitniot. Okay.
Rabbi, what exactly do we mean by kitniot?
Kitniot are certain objects that the Ashkenazic rabbis forbade us from using as a fence because they appeared to be similar to chametz, or they were often processed regularly with chametz, and therefore they said that it was too hard to distinguish. So, for instance, one of the traditions is that certain types of grains or beans were put in the same type of bags that originally had flour, and therefore that was the norm. Therefore, if we would want to use that, we wouldn't be able to because it would have flour on it. Another one is that when some of these things are ground, they appear to look like flour from wheat flour. Therefore, they said it would cause issues. So the Ashkenazic rabbis said those things were forbidden. We'll talk about it a bit more when we get to that section as to why and how it applies to us and so forth. Yes?
It's just about the raw vegetables. Is that something we need about year-round, but they're putting additives?
No, there were people who suspected that first thing, the additives are kitnium, so that's the problem. There were people who suspected that fruit had in the stuff they put out to shine them, like an apple, was a wax, and that wax was trace. However, it may be that it's trace. However, the amount that's on there is considered inconsequential, so we don't, even if it is trace, and it may not be. And it may not even have anything on it. But if it does, and it's trace, then it's still inconsequential. So that you don't have to worry about during the year.
And cut lettuce, same thing, bag lettuce?
So bag lettuce it's not a question of it. Yeah, when you buy bag lettuce, it has to be certified kosher, because somebody has to. The purpose of it is because they have to check it for bugs. That's the real issue.
Check it yourself.
Well, if you check it yourself, you don't gain a lot by buying it in bags, but then you wouldn't have a problem, right? It's just the whatever they put on it wouldn't be an issue, if anything. Okay, now fruits, they mentioned, has many syrups, which can be problematic. Therefore, you have to be very careful with any types of processed fruit that you buy, like canned fruit. Same thing applies to frozen. And the reason with frozen, even though they don't often have juices, is because in the last decade, 2 decades almost now, many of the companies that manufacture frozen fruit in bags, right, or frozen vegetables in bags, also manufacture pastas and vegetable with pasta and specialty items like that, all made on the same machine. So there's no guarantee that while there is no actual, like, you're not going to open up a container usually of broccoli, frozen broccoli, and find spaghetti in it. There's no guarantee that you won't find some small amounts of spaghetti in it, because they're made in the same machines with no assurance at all that there's no mixing. So therefore, one has to be careful in those areas as well. So while it used to be true that many canned objects did not have to have certification, that has changed over the past 10 years. So we have to be stricter on that. Another area this applies with are juices. Even if the juice says 100% pure, or if anything's 100% pure, it's not necessarily really 100% pure. You'll take a look at silk, right? The soy milk, it's dairy. Right? They say, why should it be dairy if it's soy milk? By definition, you would want it to be par. But because the government allows a certain small amount of things to be put into other foods, and it's such a small amount that they don't list it on the ingredients. Or if a company buys a product that's already processed and then does some more to it and packages it again, they don't have to tell you everything that's in the original processed food. They just tell you that food and then what they've added to it. So that also could lead to problems, even with things like frozen fruit, which seems to be simple, but the reality is it's not.
So things like silk you can't use anymore with meat?
Silk?
Yeah.
No. Silk is not dairy equipment. It now says dairy.
Really?
Yeah. There are other brands.
He doesn't die from it, so.
Okay. Well, it's probably a small amount.
It's got to be very small.
But there are other ones that are marked par.
Okay.
Other brands. Okay. Let's address milk and milk products. So milk is the first one that has a bit of an interesting story with it. Firstly, milk contains vitamin D and E, and there's hummocks in vitamin D. Vitamin D is made out of hummocks. I don't know the exact formation, but I know that it's made from hummocks. And therefore, when you buy milk on Pesach, you have to buy kosher for Pesach milk. And that will not have vitamin D. And very often it'll be listed in the ingredients as having vitamin D and say kosher for Pesach on it. And if it's more than a sticker that's put on it, but it's actually manufactured, like in other words, the bottle or the container says kosher for Passover on it with a certification, so then you can presume there is no vitamin D in it. They just didn't change the labels. And that would be, you'd be able to use it because it says kosher for Passover. Where milk became interesting as an issue was that for many of us, we lived in cities that did not have a lot of kosher for Passover items. One of the items that was hard to make kosher for Passover was milk, because it's not something that's shipped in. Like, you could live, if you live in a small town in New York State, they don't ship milk in from New York City where there's a large Jewish community. The milk is done locally. And if there are not that many Jews, they're not going to spend the time to certify their milk as kosher, because They're not going to pay that extra money in a small town. So it was very common that you could not get kosher for Passover milk. And so what they did, and it was done in my youth, very common, was that you had to purchase all of your milk, actual milk, before Pesach. And by buying it before Pesach, then whatever chametz was in the vitamin D, which was in the milk, was batel. Batel is a Hebrew word that means inconsequential. It's so small that as if it's not there, according to Jewish law. But there's a law in Pesach that chametz is not batel on Pesach. That is, if you buy something on Pesach that has some chametz, even a little bit in it, it's considered you can't use it. But if you buy it before Pesach, then if it's that small, then you would be able to use it if there's a need. Since the milk is such a staple in the lives of people today, so they allowed people then to purchase regular milk.
On Chol Hamoed.
Well, yeah, you can't buy it on Chol Hamoed. You can't. You can't buy it on. You cannot buy it on the holiday of Passover. You must buy it before. But we don't have this issue. This does not apply to us because you can go into almost any store today and either get Chalav Yisrael kosher for Passover milk or non-Chalav Yisrael kosher for Passover milk. We can deal with Chalav Yisrael issues later, but both of them are available that are certified kosher and they're fine to use, and you don't have to rely on this leniency, and it is a leniency. That was a necessary thing because people need milk for babies and whatever, so they would do that. When it comes to processed dairy products, they also have to be certified kosher for Passover because of ingredients, like in cheeses, because of vitamin D again, a number of other issues that would arise. So cottage cheese, cream cheese, any of these types of things that you might use, hard cheeses, they all have to be certified kosher for Passover. In general, just as a practical note, almost all kosher cheese, almost all of it, is always kosher for Passover. They just don't change it. They just make it that way in the kosher factory. It's always kosher for Passover. They just leave it that way all year. But you have to look for it, because not all cheeses today, kosher cheeses become much more widespread. So today you could have kosher cheeses manufactured in non-kosher cheese factories, okay, that do a run of kosher, or they do some kosher on certain days, which will be done correctly. But then you can't rely that it's always kosher for Passover. You have to make sure it says kosher for Passover. So any cheese you buy should say it on there. It's just that most cheese you buy will say it no matter when. You can buy it in December and it'll say kosher for Passover. It doesn't mean it's from Passover. It means that it's always kosher for Passover. Right? Just like on Perrier water, it's always kosher for Passover all year. They don't change. They don't add anything to Perrier. Same is the case with a number of other things. So that's milk products.